Red River's back, and Oklahoma's got no chance.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. There is nothing better, and this episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I don't think Oklahoma is pulling an upset. Jay Smith of Locked On Sooners will try to prove me wrong. Jonathan Davis of Locked On Longhorns probably will not try and do that. I do like USC, for some odd reason, to get a bounce-back upset win against Penn State this week. Full Big Ten picks for Week 7. That's all coming up on today's show. But we'll start with you, Jay Smith of Locked On Sooners, who is, by virtue of a coin flip, down on the bottom of our three-man graphic here.
Lies on the internet.
Tell me why I am wrong that Oklahoma is outmatched at every single position and needs some sort of miracle of sorts to win this football game.
Jesus. At every single position? Like, not even the fact that we consider to have, like, the best linebacker room in college football? You're going to just say that every single position we are outmatched? Dude, that's ridiculous. Come on now.
Well, I'm putting that in the or looking at it through a lens of
disrespect.
Oklahoma,
yeah, that's what it sounds like.
yeah, 1,000%. No, like Oklahoma's defensive line is really, really good, but I love the Texas offensive line. And Oklahoma's linebackers are really good, and Danny Stutzman's a ball. But again, I love the Texas offensive line. I just don't see, when these two teams are on the field at the same time, Jay, where Oklahoma ever has an advantage.
You know, that's actually the same thing that's said every time that we play against Texas. I just don't see a single spot on this field where Oklahoma ever has an advantage. Look, we hear this. We've heard this for years. We've heard this for like the last 24 years, and every single time Oklahoma goes out there and shows out, right? We've had moments where we weren't the best. Granted, this is college football. Everybody's never going to be perfect, but in this season, I think we have one of the best defenses we've had since the early 2000s, and I know that we're going to give Texas problems because Texas likes giving up the ball, and guess what Oklahoma likes to do? Taking that bad boy. So be prepared for there to be more turnovers than you would normally see in a Texas game, except for when they play against Oklahoma.
Okay. I'll be prepared for that. Jonathan Davis, Locked On Longhorns. Would you like to shed some burnt orange angle on these things?
Yeah, I don't even think he answered the question on why he thought you were wrong. I think he just, I really don't think he answered the question. And please stop with this whole, like, we've been underdogs for 24 years. There have been plenty of times over the last 10 years where Oklahoma dominated the rivalry, where Oklahoma clearly had the better roster, right? When Texas had one of its worst decades in program history. So, Jay, you're killing me with this whole, we've been underdogs every year for the last 24 years. That literally is not the case. Spencer is right? First of all, if you take the most important, the most important facets of the football team, coaching and quarterback, I think Texas wins that by a long shot, right? And why are Sooner fans talking to me this week like Michael Hawkins is Jalen Milroe or Michael Vick? Like he is Michael Hawkins making his second career start in the Red River rivalry, which could be very overwhelming. Quinn Ewers, right? Better quarterback. Steve Sarkisian, better coach. Offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all better. And then Sooner fans keep hanging their hat on this defense, right? This Brent Venables defense that's going to come out and shock the world and shut down Sark and, it's going to carry them to victory on Saturday. So I had to look because I'm like, surely this is a top 5 defense in the country, right? The way that Jay and, all the Sooner fans are talking about it. Would you believe that this Oklahoma defense that you're hanging your hat on is 41st in the country in yards given up and 76th in pass defense? And what do the Texas offense do really well? They pass the ball. So I don't even see how you can hang your hat on the when have we ever talked about the 41st best defense being something a team can hang their hat on? Meanwhile, the Texas defense is top 3. Right, in scoring defense and total defense given up. Texas is just better at every position. I know it's the Red River rivalry and anything could possibly happen, in the Cotton Bowl on Saturday. But Texas is just the better team, right? Vegas thinks it. That's why Vegas looks the way that they do. They base it off of logic, not emotion, right? And Vegas is saying that Texas is 2 touchdowns better than Oklahoma. And I and Spencer agree that Texas is 2 touchdowns better than Oklahoma.
Yeah, I do agree. Allow me to defend Oklahoma briefly from something you said in there, Jonathan. Has Texas faced an offense as capable as Tennessee's? Because that's the foundation in my head where I say I like Oklahoma's defense, because I think that that Tennessee offense is really capable, and they played really well to start the season. And this is not, Tennessee's offense is not actually good, because look at what they did against Arkansas. I think Arkansas is actually a pretty solid football team. But Jay, back to me being the biggest Texas fan in the country here outside of Austin. One of my biggest concerns is that Oklahoma offensive line against this Texas front four. I think the Texas defense is one of the most underrated units in all of college football, because you think of Texas and you think of familiar names. You think of Steve Sarkisian, you think of Quinn Ewers, you think of Isaiah Bond, you think of the way their offense looks. It's clever, it's fun, it's explosive, but that front four, I go back to that Michigan game and say, man, they were really good, and they have been all season.
Yeah, no, I'll give Texas that coming into this season, they had the perfect scenario. You've got a good veteran offensive line, and you've got a quarterback that's in a coach's offense for his 3rd year. That's exactly why Texas got all of its hype. I don't think Texas defensive line is all that good. I don't think it's better than Oklahoma's. And I bet you our defensive line is better than Texas's offensive line. We're going to go in there. We're going to continue to get sacks all over them. Look, we gave Tennessee hell, and Tennessee was considered one of the best offensive lines in college football too at one point. At least we used to give teams respect until they played against Oklahoma, and that is absolutely fine. Our offense is still growing. We've got a young quarterback, and we're still forming things up. Our offensive line, we've dealt with losing have a lot of players injured, but the good thing is, over the last 2 weeks, we've had continuity and no injuries. And so, to me, I think the one thing that we've done to Texas every time we played them the last 24 years is we whooped their ass in the trenches, and I think that's going to continue like we always do.
Hey, Jay, I have a question for you, right? Just a reminder. I know you watch a lot of college football. Uh-huh. You do know that Oklahoma has to outscore Texas in this game to win it, right? On Saturday. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you do know that, right?
Yeah, we can outscore you, and we're going to beat you with defense. All we got to do is shut you down. I mean, it's not like it's that hard. We did it last year. Yeah, it is. It actually is. I mean, if you think about the way it went, because I remember last year, everybody was talking about just how great Quinn Ewers was when it came to Steve Sarkisian. He's just this master of offense, and then we went in there and punched him in their throat. What happened last year? We're going to do that again this year. Don't worry about it. We're going to do that again this year.
Outplaying Quinn Ewers. You don't have that this year.
You sure? Okay. Well, you don't even know. That's the good thing about it is you have no clue. And so once he goes out there and shows you, no. You have no clue. You have no clue. So the good thing is once we go out there and play, you'll see the difference. Don't worry.
You don't know what Michael Hawkins is yet.
So I do want to touch on that. This is the best segment I've ever had on this show. Michael Hawkins is making his 2nd start, Jay. And look, he had moments against Auburn. I think we can all agree, I hope, we can all at least agree Texas is a better team than Auburn in just about every sense of the term. Hawkins made a big throw late in that game. That deep ball, I forget who caught it. I'm sure you know off the top of your head. Yeah. That deep ball was chef's kiss, thing of beauty. That was an Oklahoma offense that also had 10 points against Auburn going into the 4th quarter. What does Michael Hawkins need to do better to be more productive? Because I don't think you hang around with Texas if you have 10 points in 3 quarters.
I mean, Texas was doing that with Mississippi State last week, and they had a freshman quarterback out there playing. So it's not like it's something that's not unrealistic, especially going into halftime. All we've got to do is play really good defense, and Michael Hawkins just got to protect the ball. He can scramble and he can run. He's really good at that. And when he decides to sling it, he slings it pretty well. And so all he's got to do is continue to do what he's been doing week over week, building very good weeks. And I promise you that Texas defense is not as intimidating as everybody's trying to make it.
If Michael Hawkins is as good as you think he is, like if Michael Hawkins is this world beater, why was Jackson Arnold the starter coming into the season?
The team was built around Jackson Arnold coming in, and Michael Hawkins showed out. It just happens. So we've seen that before.
They just realized 2 weeks ago that Michael Hawkins was a dog.
3 weeks ago.
Well, better late than never. Better late than never.
That's what happens.
As I always say. Let's get to our game score predictions here. Jay Smith, Locked On Sooners. We will start with you. Your score prediction for Saturday at the Cotton Bowl.
Give me 24-20 Oklahoma.
Jonathan.
I'm going 34-13 Texas.
Jonathan, you took my score right out of my head. Now I have to change it. It is bad juju for my picks. If I go for the exact same score.
No. Be confident. Go with the same. Do it.
No, this is Locked On Longhorns with just a brown screen. You know what I'm saying? We all know
exactly. Just follow his logic. Go ahead.
You know what? I'm going to double down on my love for the Texas defense here. Oklahoma fans not going to like me this week. 31-10. I've got Texas winning the football game and winning big. Jonathan Davis, Locked On Longhorns. Jay Smith, Locked On Sooners. Check them out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Fellas, appreciate the time.
Appreciate it, guys.
USC pulling an upset this week against Penn State. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about Game Time, which has a new feature. It's called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. Game Time's got it. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. How great is that? You know exactly what to expect when you show up to the event. And Game Time also has their lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Do you know what time it is? It's game time. Penn State on upset alert? I think so. Zach Seyko, Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm picking USC to win this football game, Zach. Not because I think USC is great. Not because I think Penn State is terrible. But part of my reasoning is legitimately, call me insane, the madness that is college football and the illogical nature of a lot of picks. On paper, there's no reason Penn State should lose this game. USC has struggled to stop the run. Penn State loves to run the football. Penn State's front four has looked good to me this year. USC's offensive line, not so great. But I pick USC for these two reasons. Number one, long trip. Long trip, it is hard to go across country and win a football game. It's different when you go play a Rose Bowl because you're there for the entire week. You're going there on a relatively short turnaround to play the football game. That's reason number one. And reason number two, I think the Minnesota loss kicks USC back into high gear the way the Kentucky loss kicked Ole Miss into high gear. Am I nuts?
No, I don't think at all. I think there's good reason to pick USC for those points. USC doesn't have to travel. They wait for Penn State to go to them, right, in the LA Coliseum. USC kind of showed what happens when another Big Ten team goes to the Coliseum. Of course, Wisconsin's not to the caliber of Penn State, but it was 21-10 at half, and then the second half it was 28-0. Spencer, I disagree with you. I think Penn State is good enough to overcome that because I brought up those points as well. It's not that Penn State doesn't know that USC's backs are against the wall. I agree. They're going to put in plays. There's going to be a little bit of desperation because I don't know that a 9-3 USC team, even if they win all the way out, I don't know if a 9-3 USC team makes the college playoff inside of that top 11, not the top 12, top 11 because they don't get that 12th spot. So I understand where USC is playing from, but Penn State's not just going to say, okay, well, because their backs are against the wall, we're going to let them play that way. We're going to let them play aggressively. No, Penn State has everything in front of them. They still have the expectation that this is a must-win game. It's not just a must-win game for USC. This is a must-win game for Penn State because if they lose now to an unranked team, then you got to go and save your season somewhere else. And do you really want to do that? Would you rather go all in on trying to win this game against USC or go all in against winning against my national championship pick in the Ohio State Buckeyes? So Penn State's kind of in a similar situation where both teams need to go all in to get an all too important victory at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think 10-2 for any Big Ten team likely gets you into the playoff. Look out, Indiana.
Well, it should.
And I'm not even kidding when I say look out for Indiana because that could be a 10-2 team by the end of the year. I'm just saying.
Yep.
Just saying if they anyway. We'll get to the Hoosiers on another day, but I don't know that I agree with your characterization that it's all on the line here for Penn State as much as it is for USC. The Trojans just got upset by a Big Ten team that is not going to win more than 7 games this season. Like maybe 8, but like Minnesota, like they're okay. Penn State, if they lose this game, they could lose to Ohio State, and I think they can win the rest of their games pretty easily. I mean, Washington has to go all the way across the country. Like, who else do you think trips up the Nittany Lions and could put them to 9-3 if they do lose to Ohio State? A game, might I add, they play at home.
Well, it's not really that, Spencer. It's the fact that Penn State has the goals bigger than, well, let's just get 10-2 and let the committee decide this. No, they want to get as close. They want to get out of the conversation to the point where it's not up to a room full of people that say, hey, this is what we think of this Penn State football team. They don't want to leave it up to outside judgment. So if you go 11-1, that lone loss against Ohio State, and then put yourself in the Big Ten championship conversation where it could be a hypothetical rematch of Ohio State and Penn State, right? That's Penn State's goal. Penn State's goal isn't here like, okay, we can drop a couple of games here, but we'll be safe because it was USC and Ohio State. Again, USC is unranked currently. Okay, I imagine that 10-2 gets you into, but I don't think Penn State's too keen on, well, we're the 10 seed and we're okay with going on the road to wherever for a playoff game. They want to go to 11-1. They want to control their own fate, and that's how they look at it. So, yes, going all in against USC absolutely makes sense to me. But I agree with so when I look at USC, this team is better than people are giving them credit for. I think the travel certainly helps USC's cause, but they deserve to lose those games against Michigan and Minnesota. But if they got lucky, who's to say this wasn't a 5-0 team and this was a top 10 matchup between Penn State and USC? If the ball bounces a couple different ways in both of those games, if that's a fumble at the Minnesota goal line, let's maybe take away the pick six against Michigan, USC's 5-0. And I think they didn't get blown out by any regard, even though I did expect them to lose to both Michigan and Minnesota, and I have the FanDuel tickets to back it up.
Oh, boy. I respect the Minnesota pick. I understand the Michigan pick. I thought USC had turned a corner. They're not as far along as I and many Trojan fans thought, or for some of them hoped that they would be. But let's talk about this game in more detail here, Zach. Mm-hmm. Penn State wins the game and covers the 5.5-point spread if they what?
Well, you do exactly what Minnesota and Michigan did, but better. So you talked about how Penn State likes to run the football. Well, they do, because they have Nicholas Singleton, who is most likely going to play in this game. He was saw him at practice today. Everything's trending in the right direction based on all of the intel and what we see with our actual eyes. Katron Allen, same deal. Andy Kotelnicki can run the ball 60 times. He can throw the ball 60 times if he wanted to with his former 5-star quarterback. So Penn State isn't boxed in. And that's the difference. Okay, so Michigan threw for what? Alex Orji had 32 passing yards, and they won that game
32.
Okay, so now you're seeing my point. So they were able to run the football, even though that's the only thing they could do. Same thing with, now Minnesota had a better, I guess, more effective game plan, if you will, because they were able to balance it, but they still didn't throw a lot. 19 pass attempts for Minnesota, but they had Major and Taylor. I'm a big fan of Darius Taylor out at Minnesota. I think
he's a good football player.
Yes, very good football player, and he'll be playing on Sundays. Well, Penn State has that with Singleton and Allen, their own version of it, their own dynamic duo at running back. Better quarterback, Alex Orji. I don't know if he's considered a quarterback. That's why Dave Portnoy's getting involved in there. And then Minnesota, a quarterback that threw only 19 passes, and they were still able to beat USC. So Penn State isn't boxed in offensively. They can do whatever they need to do, and that's the difference. So if USC wants to push this game to a shootout, which I fully expect them to do, USC's only way of winning games is by outscoring teams, outpacing them. You have all the offensive weapons in the world, but you can't stop anybody defensively. Even though the defense has stepped up relatively against Michigan and Minnesota, but those teams aren't good offensively. Penn State is a very balanced team. They play complementary football, and that's why I have them winning 34-27.
I like the Trojans. I think this game looks and feels a lot like the Week 1 game against LSU. I don't think the Trojans' defense was bad or the problem last week. It was more about the offense, and I trust USC to right that ship a lot more than I trust them to make quick adjustments on defense. So give me a game that maybe USC sneaks in the high 30s, all of them right on, or into the low 30s, but all of them right on that 30 number. I'll go 30-27 USC wins football game. Zach Seyko, Locked On Nittany Lions. He's sticking around, folks, because we're picking every other game in the Big Ten next. Does Iowa beat Washington, who looks like they're on the rise? What does Zach think about Oregon, Ohio State? What do I think about that game? It's coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, which is super cool. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Do you want to bet college football? Do you think that mine and Jonathan's take collectively of Texas covering is crazy? Well, go bet it at FanDuel.com. Do you think Oklahoma's winning outright? You can bet a money line at FanDuel.com. Do you think USC is getting blasted and I am a fool? Go bet Penn State -5.5 at FanDuel.com. Everything that you want in the college football gambling world, it's over there. Just check them out at FanDuel.com. Iowa, Washington, under the radar important game this week in the Big Ten. Full Big Ten Week 7 picks with Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions joining me here on the show. One of these teams is going to have 2 losses in conference play after Saturday. Iowa at home, Kinnick Stadium. Washington on the road following the win against Michigan where they beat the number 10 team in the country. First ever top 10 win for Jedd Fisch as a head coach. That's a big deal. They were at home. 2 reasons I like the Hawkeyes here, Zach. Number 1, Iowa's offense is capable. It's not great, but it is capable. They went on the road to Minnesota, scored more points than USC's offense did. So at the very least, it's better than it used to be. They're at home, and I think this is an emotional letdown spot for Washington after catapulting their season forward. Give me the Hawkeyes. Low-scoring game, though, 24-20.
Yeah, I agree with you there. There's also, yes, the travel element. I'm not saying that the travel, when I pick Penn State, I'm not saying the travel element doesn't affect them. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect them, but, and that's why I have, USC keeping that game close there. But to talk about Washington and Iowa specifically, Washington's not only, I agree with you, the first thing I'm thinking, emotional letdown, right? That's an emotional win at home against a Michigan team that you lost to in the national title game. Okay, now you got to turn around. You got to hop on the plane. You got to go to Iowa, and then you're playing this game at 12 Eastern time. So that's kind of a double whammy there. That there's no juice here with the Iowa Hawkeyes, and then you have to play a game at 9 a.m. your time. So and that's the thing. I think Washington's a really quality team. It would not surprise me if they prove me wrong and prove yourself wrong and win this game because I think they're going to continue to get better. They're going day by day. This is a very talented team that just needs a little bit of chemistry. Once they get chemistry, they are a dangerous. Hopefully, if they were to win out and sneak into the playoff and sneak in as an underrated team at 10-2, I could see them upsetting a higher seed in that case. But they would have to beat Iowa. I think Iowa matches up well enough in this case to win the game. Two defensive teams to this point. I just don't know if this game was maybe a little later in the season and Washington was a little more put together, then I'd think otherwise. But right now, in the middle of October, middle of November, different story. And that's why Penn State, Washington could be an interesting one down the road.
Top 3 matchup in Eugene, Oregon, hosting Ohio State, college game day game. Josh Pate is there with, I don't remember what the name of the tour is off the top of my head, but it is, everybody's out there. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on Eugene against my Ducks. I've got Oregon winning 27-23. This, again, coin flip, go either way sort of game. Who's got the ball last? Who makes a play late? Who turns the ball over less? It feels like one of those games to me. And I lean with the home teams in these spots. And again, long road trip. People might get tired of hearing that. It's a very real thing for football teams. Oregon wins 27-23.
Yeah, jet lag is a very real thing, and these aren't professionals. They're still, even though I know college football's trending away from that, Spencer, there's still an element of amateurism. So, but Ohio State is built differently. There were a lot of NFL caliber players that should have went to the draft, but did not because we are in the age of NIL. It's not that Oregon's not a top 5 team. I just think Ohio State has enough to offset the travel conditions. They have the 2 running back system in a Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. I don't like that game for Penn State at this point in time. I don't like that game for Oregon. I think Ohio State's defense isn't getting enough credit. I'm glad that you have it a little bit lower scoring. Oregon has not shown enough to me in terms of, again, you had the scare against Idaho. You had the scare against Boise State. Now, Ashton Jeanty is a very good,
Absurd.
very
that
good. Yes,
that
yeah,
guy's really good.
I'm underrating him just by saying very good in the same sentences as Ashton Jeanty. But I like what Ohio State can do as a collective football team. I don't know that Oregon's defense is good enough to get Ohio State off of the football field, and they'll be able to sustain those long 10, 12, 15 play drives. Figure out who's going to take the football. Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, and then you got to stop Emeka Ibuka and that true freshman, actually, and Jeremiah
Smith. An 18-year-old, very different from the 17-year-old in Tuscaloosa, wildly different, some would say.
I'll take the Buckeyes here. I'll take the Buckeyes, and I think they win by at least something along the lines of 31-21.
I am not exclusively picking home teams this week, but it's called home field advantage for a reason. Minnesota goes to UCLA. Purdue goes to Illinois. I don't know if the Boilermakers or the Bruins are going to win another football game combined this year. Like, the over-under combined win total for those two teams for the rest of the season is probably 1.5. And I think I would take the under. I mean, I think Minnesota goes into the Rose Bowl and keeps the good times rolling against UCLA. I don't think Purdue can upset Illinois.
See that? Okay, so I agree with you with Purdue and Illinois. Illinois is a more of a complete football team. Penn State showed some weaknesses there, but Purdue's just, I don't know what's wrong with them. I thought Hudson Card.
Lots of things are wrong with Purdue.
I haven't seen enough of Purdue, but I know confidently in what I've seen of Illinois and researching them when they played Penn State that that's a capable football team. That's a top 20 football team, and they should be able to roll at home. UCLA is interesting because they've gone to Hawaii. They've gone to LSU. They've played Oregon. They've played Penn State. They are so battle-tested. Same thing that we're applying to Washington, Spencer. Why can't we apply that to Minnesota? That there's an emotional letdown here. And then you got to travel to the Rose Bowl that's probably going to be, half empty? Maybe you might get a quarter of fans to show up. The Bruins aren't exactly known
I think if they fill half of that stadium, they'll be doing very well.
Okay, so, and what's the excitement there? This game could finish around after midnight, right? 12:30 in the morning. Minnesota's going to be exhausted. UCLA, I saw some things. And talking to Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked On UCLA, this would be a better football team if the offense could help them out. Well, Eric Bieniemy, his system, they just have to get used to it. I like whatever quarterback they go with, whether it's Ethan Garbers or now Justin Martin, who actually showed something against Penn State. That was a 12 p.m., 9 a.m. kickoff for them, and they played a decent football game. Give me the Bruins to beat Minnesota with that emotional letdown. I think UCLA wins. Maybe
the only man in America brave enough to pick UCLA to win a football game is Zach Seyko, and I respect it. Last two games in the Big Ten, who's more likely to pull a road upset? Northwestern at Maryland, couple teams looking for their first conference win, or Wisconsin at Rutgers in Piscataway?
I just don't think Wisconsin has enough between losing the starting quarterback, top running back. They still have a relatively good defense, but now they don't have that complementary football to help out that defense. I think Rutgers, they got some defensive players back from injury. That certainly helps getting them acclimated and back up to game speed. I like what I've seen from Rutgers. They did beat that Washington team at home. I'm going to take Rutgers here at home. Same thing with Maryland. I think Maryland's just more of a complete football team. So if Maryland wants to speed things up and go a little more up-tempo on offense, I can't see Northwestern keeping up with them. They might get some defensive stops here and there, but eventually your offense has to be able to sustain drives, give your defense a break. I'm bringing up complimentary football, Spencer, because it's so important, and Northwestern just doesn't do that. Maryland, to an extent, does. They're more of a complete football team, even though they're not good, great, or elite. But I like them at 7-5, 8-4 team. Northwestern just doesn't scream that to me. So give me the Terrapins.
I'll go Maryland wins, but a Northwestern cover. I think Rutgers wins and covers at home. Zach Seyko, Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show, Spencer. Anytime.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.